All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are diving deep into a pretty radical new idea for an economic model called the OMporium. It's an entire ecosystem that wants to completely change how we think about value, moving away from things like markets and speculation, and instead building an economy on something way more fundamental. And to understand what that is, we've got to start with a really big question.
Seriously, think about that for a second. What if your day-to-day life, the energy you use, the knowledge you have stored in your brain, and even the physical space you take up was the actual basis of your economic power? What if that was the new money? It's a huge concept, and it's the bedrock for everything we're about to get into. The whole philosophy of the Emporium can really be boiled down to this one powerful equation. The idea is that money isn't just paper or numbers on a screen. At its core, it's a stand-in for work that's already been done, for energy that was used over a certain amount of time. So when you have money, what you really have is control over someone else's stored time and energy. Getting your head around that idea is pretty crucial for what comes next. So to really get why a system like OMporium would even be imagined, we first have to look at the problems it's trying to fix. The folks behind it are basically starting from the idea that our current understanding of money, both the regular kind and the digital kind, has some pretty serious issues. And these are frustrations a lot of us can probably relate to, right? You've got fiat currency, like the US dollar, which is really just backed by faith. That makes it vulnerable to things like inflation. And then on the other side, you've got many digital currencies that were supposed to be the answer, but they brought a whole new set of problems: insane speculation, huge energy usage, and a total minefield when it comes to regulations and taxes. And here is the big shift, all in one slide. OMporium is set up to be a direct answer to all those problems. So instead of being backed by faith and debt, its value is designed to be backed by, get this, physics and provable work. Instead of a system that rewards just accumulating more and more capital, it wants to reward direct, measurable contributions. Okay, so let's get into the core solution. This is where we kind of leave the world of traditional economics behind and step into a totally new framework that the system calls temporal economics. It's a huge shift from valuing what markets say something is worth to valuing the actual physics of our existence. So what does that really mean? Well, in this model, value isn't decided by supply and demand on some open market. No, instead, it's calculated directly from three main things: the time you put in, the energy you use, and the knowledge you contribute. These things become the new universal way to measure value. Now, the big metric that ties all of this together is called space-time occupancy, or STO for short. Now look, the actual math behind it is incredibly complicated, but the easiest way to think about it is as your own personal value score inside this ecosystem. It basically takes your existence, your physical body, how much energy you use, your proven knowledge, and turns it into a single quantifiable number. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds really philosophical, maybe a little sci-fi. But how does it actually work in the real world? How do you take your space-time occupancy and turn it into something you can, use? This is where the whole thing gets very practical. The whole process starts right in your own home. First, your physical presence there is validated through what's called proof of occupancy. Next, smart meters are used to track your utility usage to literally mine energy. All that energy you use then becomes a raw digital commodity called OM. And finally, you can stake that OM you've created to mint gravity, which is the actual currency of the ecosystem. And the amount you can mint is boosted by your knowledge. Let's just pause on that for a second, because this is a really important distinction. OM is the base commodity. It's the stored energy that you mine just by living your life. Gravity is the currency you create from that raw material, and its value is amplified by your knowledge. So you can think of it like this. OM is the potential, and gravity is the realized value that you can actually go out and spend. So now we know how a single person creates value in the system, but how does this scale up? Let's zoom out and take a look at how this becomes a full-blown economy with businesses, a marketplace, and a pretty unique way of measuring work. This table from the project's white paper does a really good job of showing where OMporium fits in compared to systems we already know. Let's just look at the proof of work row. In classical economies, that's things like GDP or labor. With Bitcoin, it's about computers solving crazy hard math problems. But in OMporium, the proof of work is your validated knowledge and intellectual property. Your contribution is the work. So how in the world do you measure validated knowledge? Well, according to the model, it's based on these three multipliers. It's not just about what you know, that's accumulation. It's also about your ability to package that knowledge and share it, That's duplication. And finally, it's about how many people actually benefit from it. That's amplification. All three of these things together are meant to figure out your economic weight in the system.
And businesses are a huge piece of this puzzle. In the Emporium model, companies get involved by moving their employees into these specialized homes. And by doing that, they're not just giving them a place to live, they're actually staking OM to back their entire workforce, plugging their company's economic output directly into the whole network.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. We've talked about the problem, we've looked at the physics-based solution, and we've seen the mechanics of how the ecosystem is supposed to work. So what's the ultimate goal here? What does wealth even look like in this new world? This right here is the final and maybe the most profound shift in thinking. In the Emporium, wealth isn't about hoarding assets or piling up money in a bank. Wealth is something that has to be proven through your ability to contribute, to create, and to be efficient with your time and knowledge. It's an active, ongoing demonstration of your value, not a static number. So let's just recap the biggest takeaways. In this system, value is tied directly to provable time, energy, and knowledge. That means your daily life can actually generate real economic equity. The whole point is to reward active participation, not just sitting on the sidelines and speculating. And by tying everything to a real person's identity, the model is actually designed to be compliant with regulations right from the start. And that brings us to our final thought for the day. The entire OMporium system is really an attempt to answer this one massive question. Forget the stock market, forget all the speculative assets out there. If you could actually quantify the real, physical, and intellectual value of your own existence, what would that be worth? It's a pretty fascinating question to chew on. Thanks for joining me.